pull this hat up a little bit, get the shadow out of my face. Yeah, going live, talking about this day in African American baseball history. It's going to be a short broadcast today. Just trying to get her done. And I want to thank everybody for joining in. If you've never joined us before, my name is Phil. I go by Phil S. Dixon, and I'm a baseball historian, nationally recognized. And I talk about the Negro Leagues. And so the thing that I've been doing a lot of here lately is this day in African American baseball history. Of course, today is September 16th, 2025, and that's a live edition. So I give things that happened today, and then I add a little more commentary from that comes from my 40 some odd years of doing research on this topic. So I used to can add something maybe that maybe the average person doesn't hear too often, or can't read in books. That's another thing. So I'm coming to you live, of course. You know, I'm outside. It's about 90 degrees, so I find a good place here so I can at least get this broadcast done. And so anyway, we're going to jump right into it. So I want to thank everybody for coming in. And by the way, if you like this broadcast and what we're doing here, subscribe and share it, and we'll go from there. But this is a pretty serious baseball stuff. No, it's fun stuff. It's not that serious, but it's history, and it's something that if you're really a baseball fan and a fan of the Negro Leagues, then these are things that you ought to know. So we're going to jump right in here. Let's go to the first one, February 16th, 1917. We're going to start right there. Shutting out C.I. Taylor's ABCs, that's the Indianapolis ABCs, 4-0. All Nations pitcher John W. Donaldson, that's John Wesley Donaldson, allowed 2 hits, one in the 7th and another in the 8th at Kansas City's Association Park. So, John Donaldson got the victory. I talk about John Donaldson quite a bit on these broadcasts. John Donaldson is somebody who came up for the Hall of Fame. He was actually on the ballot in 2006. He was on there again, I think in 2021, I believe that was, when Bud Fowler and Buck O'Neill got in. He didn't get in then, didn't get in the first time. And the last time he was on there was just this past December, and he didn't get in. I thought he'd have a really good shot of getting in. I don't know why they don't want to vote for John Donaldson. He's one of the all-time greats. So I really feel like he's getting short-circuited. But hey, just to show you, he's not a member of any league team. He's pitching for the All Nations, who are outside of the league. Of course, in 1917, they didn't really have a league out west. So they were more like independent teams playing each other. Chicago American Giants and the Indianapolis ABCs were 2 of the strongest teams at that time. So to take one of the strongest teams in black baseball and 2 hit them, let you know that this guy has some ability. So I like talking about John Donaldson. Of course, there's C.I. Taylor. Now, C.I. Taylor is in the Major League. I don't like calling it the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, because when you talk about major leagues, you're talking about National American League. But believe me, the Negro Leagues were major leagues too. So we'll just call it the Baseball Hall of Fame, National Baseball Hall of Fame at Cooperstown, New York. C.I. Taylor is enshrined there. So if you want to learn more about C.I. Taylor, certainly go there and see what you can find. C.I. Taylor was a avid African American. He went to the AME Church, African American Episcopal Church, there in Indianapolis. Died in 1922. Died early on in the early years of the Negro National League. If this guy had lived longer, no telling what a difference he might have made. And he had already made a significant contribution to baseball as it was played by African Americans up to the time of his death. So, and then his wife ended up taking over the team and became the first female owner in the Negro National League. I'm not sure, but I think her name is Bernice. So somebody can look that up and find it. Okay, so we're going to jump a few more years after that. Let's go up to September 16, 1922. The Baltimore Black Sox, their pitcher Frank Doc Sykes, S-Y-K-E-S, tossed a no-hitter against the Bacharach Giants, and it was a pleasure for me to interview Doc Sykes. Now, Doc Sykes, I don't know how much you know about him. He was an academic. Actually, his profession was a dentist, and he graduated from. I've got my little book here that tells me when he graduated. He graduated in 19. Actually, looks like 1918 with his dentistry degree from Howard University. And when the time I interviewed him, he was still living at St. James Terrace Apartments, 827 North Arlington Avenue in Baltimore, Maryland. And yeah, Frank Doc Sykes, interesting character. Not only was he a college graduate, he was an outstanding athlete, played basketball, played baseball, then became a dentist, and let's see, it was oh shucks, I'm forgetting the case now. In the 1930s, he testified in a very famous case. I'm drawing a blank on the case right now. It'll come to me in a moment. But yeah, Frank Sykes, interesting guy to talk to. And when we interviewed in the early 80s, I used to call him on the telephone, and I would ask him about all the guys from Howard. And he was able to tell me all the guys who went to various colleges, and I was able to put that together firsthand. Now, many people have added to that kind of history since then, but back then, these interviews were key. And so having the opportunity to interview Doc Sykes was important. And part of the thing, I'm getting this information. If you're a researcher, you have to get all kinds of places to get your information. This is a book right here, Howard University Directory of Graduates, 1870 to 1980. This book is so good. It even had the people's telephone numbers in there, and you could call them. So, but I forget how I got his telephone number, but I was able to get that. And I've used that book many times when I'm researching Howard University baseball players from the past, all the way up. Actually, this book right here goes to 1980. I have another one that goes as far as 1990. So, but you have to have good reference material if you're going to be a good researcher. So I have a library of all of these kind of information. So anyway, happy to say that I interviewed Frank Doc Sykes. Excuse me, my throat's a little scratchy today, so just excuse me there. Okay, let's go to the next fact. September 16, 1922. All right, so now we're talking about the Negro National League years. And Sykes was in the Eastern Color League. So this is the Negro National League, and that's the teams in the West. He was in the East, Sykes was. So anyway, left fielder Wilber Bullet Rogan homered in Kansas City's 10-6 victory over the Omaha All-Stars at that city's Birch Rod Park. Another good, interesting thing to look at. First of all, the Negro National League had their schedule. But if they play games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, that left the middle of the week open for travel. And then instead of just traveling to and fro, they pick up games along the way. And one of their favorite cities for the Kansas City Monarchs was Omaha. And so there were some great games that took place in Omaha, and that really started back with many teams from Kansas City. The All Nations played there quite a bit. When they based out of Kansas City, started in 1915. Of course, the Kansas City Monarchs, who had the same owner, or one of the same owners, which is J.L. Wilkinson, worked out of Kansas City. Omaha, always a great place. Also, Omaha was a crossroads area. So from Omaha, you could go deeper into Iowa. You could go in one direction and head back to Nebraska. Of course, Kansas City, I think Kansas City from Omaha might be maybe 3 hours, something like that, driving on the freeway today. So I don't know what it was back then, but it wasn't that far and compared to some of the travel they were doing. So anyway, Wilber Bullet Rogan. Wilber Bullet Rogan, another guy I talked about quite a bit on these live. I knew his family, and I still know his granddaughter, but his brother Willard. I knew people who grew up with Willard and Wilber, and he got his start in my hometown playing for the Palace Colts. What's interesting is years ago, Robert Peterson wrote a book, and he said he started with the Pullman Colts, but don't believe that. Be careful where you get your research. He started with the Palace Colts. That was Fred Palace's team. Fred Palace owned a fish market off of Fifth Street. Fifth Street was one of the main thoroughfares through the African American community in Kansas City, Kansas. Went down that street all the time, going to school. Matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was down on Fifth Street. It still has some activity down there, but at that time it was bustling, and a lot of black businesses were on Fifth Street. Of course, they played at Riverside Park, and Riverside Park was at Second and Franklin, so it's in walking distance from Fifth Street. All of that is in that area. So that's where Wilber Bullet Rogan got his start. And of course, he went to the military and served in the 24th, 25th Infantry. As you know, the military was not integrated at that time. There were four black units: the 8th Regiment, the 10th Cavalry, and let's see, and then the 21st. 24th and 25th Infantry. And those were your all-black units. And Bullet Rogan left Kansas City and went to the 24th Infantry. So anyway, he comes back and he plays with the Kansas City Monarchs. He's one of their big stars. And to my estimation, he's the greatest all-around baseball player that ever lived. And that's someone who could hit and pitch. And so I talk about Bullet Rogan all the time. Great hitter. He's going to be the best pitcher on his team and the best hitter, too. So that's saying a lot. And so you couldn't just play him as a pitcher. And you know, in this game here in 1922, September 22nd, he is actually playing left field. So let's stay with Bullet Rogan. How about this? September 16, 1928. Wilber Bullet Rogan, pitch hitting for Leroy Taylor, triple to the Cars to score William Bell, while Hallie Harden drove through the box to score Bullet Rogan, and the Monarchs beat Concordia, Kansas 5-3 in 12 innings at Concordia. So they're playing in Concordia, Kansas. Now Concordia, Kansas, man, that's out on the other side of Manhattan. I don't know if you look at a map or anything like that. I've presented there before. Concordia, interesting place. When I went there, I can't remember what year it was. It was in the late 20s. The Concordia team won the Denver Post tournament, and that trophy is still there in the local historical society. The trophy they won. So I've seen it and actually had a chance to touch it and things like that. So Concordia had good baseball. So the Monarchs go down there, and they end up having to play 12 innings to beat these guys. But you got some pretty good names that are involved in this. We got Bullet Rogan, who we just talked about. Leroy Taylor, he's from Texas, a great wide receiver for Wiley University. And he played with the Monarchs a number of years. One of the few players who wore glasses also, eyeglasses, spectacles. And then, of course, Hallie Harden. Hallie Harden played shortstop, and when he came to the team, it was shortly after Dobie Moore had suffered his demise, and he was shot by a lady there in Kansas City, and shot in the leg, and it broke the main bone there, and so he ended up having to retire. So Newt Allen switched over to shortstop, and Newt Allen was playing shortstop, and they tried different second basemen. Grady Orange was there for a while, but they picked up Hallie Harden, and then Newt Allen moved over to second base, which was his position he really enjoyed playing the most. But interesting thing, I talked to Newt Allen, who I also interviewed, and Newt Allen told me that Hallie Harden's one problem is he couldn't make that long throw behind shortstop. He said he just wasn't good enough. So he played a couple of years with the Monarchs, went on to play for the Baccarat Giants in the East. I think he played for Detroit. And Hallie Harden was also a great quarterback. He quarterbacked for Wiley University, led them to conference championships, and right there with Leroy Taylor. So Hallie Harden was just a great athlete. Where I picked Hallie Harden up again is in the 1940s. He moves out to Los Angeles, and he becomes quite the sports writer. And so Hallie Harden had written a number of boxing articles, and whenever I'm researching boxing, I like to read what Hallie Harden had to say. And so anyway, these are names that may or may not be big-time names for you guys, but they're certainly names that are important. Okay, we're going to go one more, and let's do this one. September 16, 1978. Man, we jumped way into the future compared to the other facts I was giving you. And Hall of Fame pitcher Willie, or we say William, Willie Foster, died in Lorman, Mississippi. Willie Foster, that's the younger brother to Andrew Root Foster. And both of those guys are enshrined in Cooperstown, the Baseball Hall of Fame, Cooperstown, New York. Root Foster, his brother, the older guy of the two, he was a right-hander, and Willie Foster was a left-hander. And at the time that Willie passed away, you say, what is he doing down in Mississippi? Well, he was the dean of men for Alcorn University. So that's where I ended up tracking him too. And actually, if you go online, his grandson, Doug Foster, is out there representing the Foster family now, and you may see him at events. So if you see him, tell him Phil Dixon said hello. I saw him yesterday on Facebook with his grandson. How about that? So anyway, the family legacy continued. But Willie Foster was a great pitcher. He played, started out with Memphis, and ended up playing for his brother's team, the American Giants. First of all, Rube didn't want him to play baseball because baseball was a tough way to make a living back then. But Willie wanted to play baseball, so without Rube's permission, he joined the Memphis Red Sox. And Bubba Lewis was the owner at that particular time. Bubba Lewis, interesting guy. He ran a funeral home, the Lewis Brothers Funeral Home. What you might find interesting is that when Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, they took him to Bubba Lewis's funeral home, and they did the embalming there, right there in Memphis, at Lewis's funeral home. But back in the 20s, Lewis was operating the Memphis Red Sox, and this is before he kind of ran into debt a little bit, and then the Martins ended up getting his ball field. And by the way, Memphis had one of the few towns in the Negro League that had their own field. So that's all Bubba Lewis, and we don't talk about him enough too. I was able not to interview him. I interviewed his son, and I interviewed his wife. His widow was still living. This is in the 80s, early 80s. So I was able to go down, and I have a book called The Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History. There's a beautiful picture of her with Bubba Lewis and some of their friends in this beautiful picture. But if you haven't seen that book, you might want to get that book. It has 600 photographs in it, and it was selected as the best baseball book of the year in 1992. So, yeah, Willie Foster, another member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. So today we've talked about several Hall of Famers, some should-be Hall of Famers, and we talked about a dentist, and few games that were played outside the Negro National League. And for all practical purposes, these are exhibition games. Now, I will say this too, because some people don't know this. They go online and they look at the Negro League statistics. So say, for instance, you go online, you look at Wilber Bully Rugby statistics. The only statistics you see are the games they played against other African-American teams in the league. And so in some years, they didn't play that many games against these other teams in the league. So what you may have is more games played outside the league than inside the league. And so that throws people off, because people look at that and they say, oh, they played 28 games that year. They played 50 games that year. No, they played well over 100 games that year. But the economics of the Negro leagues forced them to have to play outside of their league. And then, of course, town baseball was a big thing. And it was the black athlete who kept town baseball going. And we don't get credit for that. So this is important history. And most your guys who end up in the major leagues, they played on their town teams. And many of them, before they ever got to the minor leagues, anything like that, they played against African American baseball players, primarily Negro leaguers, which are going to be, when they come to town, it's going to be the biggest draw of the year. And you're going to see major league talent right there, in this case, Concordia and Omaha. All right? So anyway, I hope that kind of gives you just an idea of what we do here. And I appreciate everyone who's joined. I don't know, got a little sun in my eyes, but somebody mentioned something about Josh Gibson. They're talking about how they didn't allow Josh Gibson. I'm not sure what, and Bob Gibson. Well, Bob Gibson certainly had his chance. Not sure what you're asking there. And someone said, I just subscribed to my channel. Thank you very much. And say, your Dixon family, do y'all come from Louisiana? And we definitely do come from Louisiana. Come from Madison Parish down in Louisiana. So, yep, by way of North Carolina. So, but who knows? Maybe that's a relative or something. I don't know. Maybe a distant cousin. But yeah, the Dixons definitely came, and my folks migrated to Kansas City in the 1920s with the Great Migration, and I'm still here and still making waves. And hey, when the family migrated from Louisiana to Kansas City, little did they know that many years later, I was going to be one of the